Welcome to Ancient Wild TV, where we bring the prehistoric world to life. Throughout history, dinosaurs and other ancient creatures have captured our imagination, often depicted as towering giants or unstoppable predators. In books, illustrations, and documentaries, these ancient beings are shown as more fearsome and powerful than anything we've ever encountered in real life. They're often portrayed as larger than life, with their size and strength exaggerated to invoke awe and fear. But there's one dinosaur that breaks this pattern. Strangely enough, the real version of this creature was far more terrifying than any depiction we've seen. In fact, what you've been shown barely scratches the surface of the true horror that this beast once embodied. What was it, you ask? You're about to discover the unsettling reality of one of the most fearsome creatures to have ever walked the earth. It is a dinosaur that was one of the first kings of the Jurassic and the largest animal in its ecosystem during its heyday. This is the Dilophosaurus. Despite only gaining worldwide recognition after the release of the iconic Jurassic Park, the Dilophosaurus has been known to paleontologists for over 80 years, with the first remains being discovered in 1940 when 3 specimens of mixed sizes were found in the early Jurassic-dated Kayenta Formation of northern Arizona. The find was remarkable, as it included a nearly complete individual, which led to it being one of the best-known preserved theropods at the time. However, because paleontology wasn't well developed at that point, many new theropods were misclassified, including the Dilophosaurus, which scientists initially believed to be a new species of Megalosaurus, another Jurassic theropod. This belief of it being a Megalosaurus quickly stuck, and for 2 decades it went unchallenged. That is until another specimen was located in the same area of the first 3 that was in even better condition. The skull in particular was more complete, and this revealed the presence of a crest which had previously been missed. The crest was located to the right of the midline, indicating that in life, this dinosaur actually had 2 distinct crests, making it clear that this theropod was no Megalosaurus, and thus it was aptly renamed to Dilophosaurus, meaning the 2-crested lizard, and moved into a new family named after it, the Dilophosauridae, which contains just one other member, the Dracovenator. Not only was this new find important as it led to the discovery of the crests, this newer Dilophosaurus specimen was also the largest individual ever found, and has remained the largest to date. It is thought to have been a fully matured adult that measured 7 meters or 23 feet from snout to tail, making it roughly the same length as the Ceratosaurus. Despite being the same length, the Dilophosaurus did sport a more hollow skeleton and agile build, resulting in it being lighter, with paleontologists believing it to have weighed about 400 kilograms or 880 pounds, which is comparable to the weight of a brown bear. While this doesn't make the Dilophosaurus as large as later theropods, it does still make it the largest known North American land animal during the early Jurassic, and many times larger than the Dilophosaurus featured in the Jurassic Park movies, which were downsized in order to avoid confusion with the Velociraptor. This has unfortunately led to many people assuming that the Dilophosaurus was a smaller predator, when in reality it was the biggest animal of its time. Another peculiar change made in the iconic franchise was the addition of a neck frill, which was possibly inspired by the modern-day frilled lizard, which uses its distinctive display to scare and ward off various predators. And while a frill would admittedly be interesting, the real Dilophosaurus likely didn't possess one, but it still had, as mentioned, the 2 prominent crests that aided the Dilophosaurus in their own ways. These relatively big crests were composed of very thin bones that ran from its snout to behind its eye socket. In life, it's thought there would have been a layer of keratin as well, meaning paleontologists are not entirely sure what the true shape of these crests were. Originally, it was thought these crests would have been used for thermoregulation due to their size and the Dilophosaurus's hot environment. However, now most agree that these crests' true purpose was likely for individual recognition or sexual selection, as the crests appear to have been highly varied in appearance and size between each individual Dilophosaurus. For some time, the idea of the Dilophosaurus using its crest as a battering ram against prey and competitors was also considered, but this conjecture is today widely unsupported as the crests were extremely fragile in nature. Although, thankfully for the Dilophosaurus, it had an array of other features that allowed it to deal with prey and competitors, with perhaps the most important weapon being its vicious jaws. The jaw and subsequently the skull were both proportionally large for its body, sometimes accounting for 10% of its entire length, which allowed enough space for its roughly 30 teeth, which were all long, curved, thin, and compressed sideways. Additionally, each tooth possessed numerous serrations, with sometimes over 70 serrations being split amongst the front and back of the tooth. These serrations allowed it to easily cut through flesh, incurring rapid blood loss and death to the unfortunate animals it preyed upon. But exactly what animals were its victims is a question that has been up for debate for a long time. One reason for this is its unique gap located at the front of its skull, which made paleontologists first believe that the Dilophosaurus had a weakly built skull that would crack under high pressure, thus leading to the idea that it was a scavenger that used a weak bite to carefully dissect carrion, or would rather only hunt small creatures in its habitat. The belief of the Dilophosaurus being a weak biter also helped to create the later notion that it was actually a piscivorous hunter. Other evidence of it being a fish specialist included its teeth forming an interlocking rosette shape towards the end of the jaws, which is similar to the pattern seen in the Spinosaurids, which are known to have preyed on fish, as well as the ghorial, a living crocodilian that is known to eat the most fish out of any croc. However, despite all the evidence, the belief that the Dilophosaurus specialized in fish and had a weak bite are now both considered likely debunked, as new research has shown that the gap that was once thought to be weak was actually immobile and extremely robust in life, allowing the Dilophosaurus to endure high forces while clamping down into struggling prey. Its size was another indication that it hunted larger terrestrial animals, as it was by far the largest predator around at the time, leading paleontologists to suspect that it grew larger than others as an adaptation specifically designed for killing big animals. And some very strong evidence of this comes from the coexisting Ceratosaurus. This was a basal sauropodomorph that was about half the size of the Dilophosaurus, and has shown signs of being preyed upon by this vicious theropod. Specifically, the holotype, located in 2018, bore various bite marks all across the body that matched those of the Dilophosaurus, and were far too large to have come from any other known predator in the area. And because Ceratosaurus was one of the biggest animals in its environment, paleontologists now believe this nightmare was an expert at taking down large animals, but still would have likely preyed upon smaller creatures and fish if the chance arose, which is to say that absolutely nothing was safe. And its bite wasn't the only weapon to be feared, as the Dilophosaurus also had potent arms that were just as deadly as its jaws. Studies on its arms show that they were relatively long, yet still surprisingly strong, thanks to deep pits that allowed for muscle and ligament attachment. Along with its strength, the arms were also highly flexible and equipped with 3 well-developed claws each, with the first one being much larger than the other 2. These claws, combined with its strength, allowed the Dilophosaurus to use its arms to prevent prey from escaping and inflict further damage through various slashing motions, which is one more reason for wanting to avoid the Dilophosaurus during the early Jurassic. And again, to the dismay of coexisting creatures, the Dilophosaurus's toolbox doesn't just end with its claws, as it also had another quite foolproof way of capturing prey despite being on the heavier side. And no, unfortunately, this technique of catching prey did not involve spitting venom to blind them as seen in Jurassic Park. Rather, it was simply a speed demon that would run prey down. The agileness of this theropod was demonstrated by its highly developed legs, lighter frame, and the presence of fleshy air sacs. These air sacs grew in its vertebrae and created unidirectional breathing, a trait seen in birds and crocodiles. This indicates that it likely had a high metabolic rate and level of activity, hinting that it was a swift hunter. And if its agility, bite, jaws, and size were not enough to completely dominate its ecosystem, there is also a chance that the Dilophosaurus was a pack hunter. This stems from the original find of its bones, as the 3 specimens were all found right next to each other, leading some to believe that they lived and hunted in packs. But if this was the case, paleontologists think that 3 individuals may have been the limit, which is due to this theropod being the giant of its homeland. Hence, it would be quite difficult to sustain more than 3 individuals. Even with all the advantages the Dilophosaurus had going for it, it turns out that life as a king is not an easy one, as the Dilophosaurus is notorious for bearing signs of wounds and disease. In fact, the holotype is known for having the highest number of damaged bones out of any theropod, with 8 being affected, while the theropod with the next highest number of damaged bones is just half of that at 4. The injuries seen in this Dilophosaurus seem to have been concentrated in its arms and involved the growth of bony tumors, stress fractures, torsions, and deformities. These injuries were disabling in life, as reconstructions have found that this individual would not have been able to properly use one of its arms and hands, leading it to rely more heavily on the other. It's not exactly known how the Dilophosaurus obtained all these injuries, but some speculate that it may have occurred through failed hunts or fights with competitors. What's interesting, though, is that despite many Dilophosaurus having banged-up arms, a study of over 60 individuals found no fractures on their legs and feet, which confirms just how useful their arms were as weapons and tools. Additionally, all paleontologists agree that the number of wounds found across all specimens show that this was one tough animal that likely had a seriously high pain tolerance. And this isn't all that surprising, as it lived during a time when the Earth was no joke. Specifically, fossil dating shows that it existed roughly 183 million years ago during the early Jurassic in what is now North America. At the time, both the supercontinent of Pangaea and the superocean Panthalassa were still around, and the Earth was still recovering from the Triassic-Jurassic extinction event, which means there wasn't that much life around. And this certainly wasn't helped by the environment, as the Earth was still relatively hot. The Dilophosaurus's environment seems to have been particularly grueling, characterized by extreme dry seasons, during which dunes would migrate in and out of its habitat. However, during that era, the presence of the large prehistoric lake, Lake Dixie, would have provided a source of relief and a food supply during these extreme dry seasons. Wet seasons occurred as well, and during those times, rivers and streams would come alive, creating habitats akin to desert oases seen today. Despite its harsh environment and the fairly recent extinction event, the Dilophosaurus was by no means alone, and it was even joined by other dinosaurs, such as the previously mentioned Ceratosaurus, as well as others including the Megapenosaurus, Kayentavinator, and Scutellosaurus. Non-dinosaurs were also present and were represented by various hybodont sharks, bony fish, lungfish, lizards, and salamanders. Other animals also included the Prosilirus, Eocaecilia, Kayentashelles, the Crocodilomorphs, Calcoiasuchus, Eopneumatosuchus, Kayentasuchus, Protosuchus, and the pterosaur Ramphinion. Meanwhile, synapsids in the area came in the form of the Dinobitodon, Kayentatherium, and Oligokyphus. Even early mammals called these lands home, as showcased by the tiny Dinotherium. And yet, despite the remarkable amount of life, none held a candle to the Dilophosaurus's size or ferocity, which allowed it to be the undisputed apex predator of early Jurassic North America. As we've uncovered today, the true legacy of the Dilophosaurus is far more impressive than anything Hollywood has shown us. While its portrayal on screen has sparked curiosity, the reality of this ancient predator is even more awe-inspiring. But Dilophosaurus isn't the only creature with a surprising past. If you're interested in learning about other prehistoric animals that have evolved in unexpected ways, don't forget to check out our previous video where we explored 7 creatures that were once giants in their evolutionary history. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe to Ancient Wild TV for more thrilling insights into the ancient wild. See you in the next adventure.